Hi, I'm Robin Martin. Welcome to Hansells Baking Club. Today I'm going to make molten chocolate cupcakes. For this recipe you will need 250 grams of butter, half a cup of cocoa, 1 1/4 cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of Hansells vanilla essence or 1 teaspoon of Hansells vanilla paste, 3 eggs, 1 cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of Hansells double action baking powder, 12 paper cupcake cases, 24 squares of dark chocolate, icing sugar or white marshmallows. I've melted my butter and cocoa together and trust me, it smells delicious. To that I'm going to add my sugar, a teaspoon of Hansells vanilla paste. If you don't want to use vanilla paste, you're missing out on a taste treat, I can tell you. But Hansells vanilla essence, 2 teaspoons of that can go into this recipe. That's almost lickable. Mix that in until it's all combined. Now at this point you have to make sure that your mixture is not too hot because we're going to add the eggs next, and if the mixture is too hot you'll end up with scrambled eggs, which is not a good look. So mix in the eggs. I do all this with a wooden spoon. This melt in the pot baking makes life so much easier on the dishes. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need cake mixers or blenders or food processors. Set of measuring cups, measuring spoons. Once this is mixed in, we're going to add our flour and baking powder. I have a cup of flour and a teaspoon of Hansells double action baking powder. Now, you wonder what double action means. This is fantastic baking powder, especially if you're making something and you're not putting the whole batch of goodies into the oven at the same time. The double action means that it starts to work when the moisture hits it, and the second part of it, the double part of the action, is it continues to work, or the next part of it happens once the heat hits it. Other baking powders that are not double action baking powder start to work immediately the ingredients get wet or their baking powder gets wet. So it's really important, especially if you're making things that don't go into the oven immediately, that you use a double action baking powder. Good quality end results come from a double action baking powder. So I'm just sieving that in. You don't need a proper sifter. I've never used a proper sifter in my whole baking career. I've only ever used a sieve. So mixing that until the flour is completely worked in. This is one of those mixtures that you don't have to worry about over mixing. It's very forgiving. The old bang on the side of the pot gets it down, gets all the flour down. Some people prefer to use a rubber scraper to get it down, but I just find this works just as well. We want it all in because we don't want any white speckles of flour through our mixture when we're done. Now we're ready to fill our cupcake cases. There are many different cupcake cases around. These ones tend to be a little bit disappointing once the cakes have cooked in them. You can't see the lovely pattern on the outside. So what I tend to do is use 2 of them if I want to have an attractive colouring on the outside. If you're using these sort of cupcake cases, you can just pop them on an oven tray. They don't necessarily need to go into the cupcake or into a muffin pan. They're freestanding and you can use them in exactly the same way. Incidentally, these ones are really good for holding their colour once the cakes have been cooked in them. They look pretty, whereas these ones are a little bit more disappointing. Anyway, these ones are readily available for most people, so that's what we're going to use today. Now, using a 1/4 cup measure, I'm going to fill my cupcake cases so as that they're 3/4 filled. A little bit more in there. If you leave your mixture to sit, it's going to do what mine's done, gone a little bit firmer. So the warmer the mixture, the more easily it will flow out of your 1/4 cup measure. Now just to show you what we're going to do here, we're going to put in a couple of squares of chocolate. Well, they're not really squares, they're rectangles, I suppose. We're going to push them down and then top them with a little bit more mixture so as the chocolate is just covered. If you decide that you're not going to put 2 squares of chocolate in, you'll find that you don't have that lovely molten runny chocolate pouring out when you bite into these things or when you use a cake fork to eat them with. These are ready, once you've filled the pan, to go into the oven and bake at 180 degrees C for 20 to 25 minutes. You can tell when they're cooked by touching the top of the cake with your finger. Just touch it lightly and it will spring back. You don't need a skewer, because if you put a skewer in and pull it out, it's going to have lovely molten chocolate on it and you'll think that your cake isn't cooked. I prefer to dust my cakes with icing sugar. But if you like, for a little Easter treat or something a little bit different, you can cut a marshmallow in half using a pair of scissors is easier, and pop half marshmallow on top of the unbaked cakes. It tends to go a little golden colour, and it's a little bit different for Easter or a special occasion. For these and more great baking ideas, go to hansells.co.nz.